This is the Dallas Morning News.
This episode is from an independent podcast hosted by the Dallas Morning News Opinion Team.
Well, I think we've got all the Kansas City Chiefs fans with us today, but I hope we've got everybody else too, because we had a conversation with a class guy. Tough situation. Inherits an NFL franchise, it's a highly visible sport, clearly in the nation, and off of success, H.L. Hunt, grandfather, Lamar Hunt, who's really set the foundation of the NFL, and he's made it a success. 12 playoffs, 11 division titles, 5 conference titles, and 3 Super Bowls. And he talked about leadership, he talked about faith, as that's the foundation of his life.
The Hunt last name is famous, but Clark has made the Chiefs his own. And he's really made his life his own. I think to your points about faith and just the culture and kind of what he's kind of breeding in a certain sense in Kansas City, but also in his family. The personal element, the professional element, obviously the sports stories are incredible. We touch so much in this episode.
Yep. You made a great point, and it's one that touches on so many different areas. I think it's going to be a great listen.
Yeah. Tune in. Welcome to Intersections, where we take a multi-generational look at the critical issues facing America. Tom, kick us off today.
Clark Hunt, it's a pleasure to have you. Clark is the head of Hunt Sports Group, been involved in 3 different MLS franchises, FC Dallas here, involved and leads the ownership of the Kansas City Chiefs. And I would tell you, if you open the dictionary, look up class guy, you're going to find a picture of Clark Hunt. Good discipline, strong principles, and a man of faith. We're going to have a good conversation. Let's start out. Iconic family background. Grandfather was H.L. Hunt, legendary. Father, Lamar Hunt, legendary. Your mother, Norma Hunt, was a leader in this community, both from a philanthropic and an art standpoint. Talk about being raised in a household like that.
Well, first of all, it's great to be on with you all today. And I did grow up in a very special home. My parents, they were tremendous parents. First of all, then they were also involved in a lot of things, both here in Dallas as well as in Kansas City. They taught me a lot of things. They were very supportive, always attended my sporting events. And in a lot of ways, I don't think it was, a much different home than a lot of other kids. Other than on the weekend, we tended to go to professional sports events, whether, that was a soccer game, an NFL game, maybe a World Championship tennis match, and occasionally a Chicago Bulls game. So there was that aspect to it, which I thought was fantastic because I was all about sports, and getting to be around the professional game on the weekends was really special.
And we've got 2 SMU graduates here. You were the captain of the soccer team when you were at SMU, St. Mark's, and then on to SMU.
Yeah, and that was a great experience, and one I had to work very hard for. SMU had a great team back in those days, and in high school, I played football, soccer, and track, and even in that time period, most of the people who played college soccer were just playing college soccer, so I had a little catching up to do, but I worked hard and ended up having a great experience and learned a lot from it. I
want you to talk a little bit more about your mother. We focus on Lamar, and we'll come back to him. But your mother was really a driver in this community. My sense is a driver in the family, and attended 57 straight Super Bowls.
Yeah. She was a very special woman. And I think most importantly, she was the perfect match for my father. In fact, while they were dating, one weekend, my dad took her to 5 football games. High school game, a couple college games, and a couple pro games across 3 days. And after the fact, he referred to it as the Fipple header. And my mother concluded that he did it because he wanted to make sure that I was really a sports fan. And she was a great sports fan, and the 2 of them had a tremendous partnership, including the 57 Super Bowls that she attended in a row from starting with Super Bowl I, which the Chiefs and the Packers played in. But she was also a leader in the community. She did a lot for the community, both in Kansas City and in Dallas. and I think really helped my dad with all of his various business enterprises.
Yeah, well, while we're in family, I want to get touch into your family. So married and 3 kids. Just talk about what having your family around and kind of not necessarily in the business, but around at the games means to you, and just how you get to do that with them.
Yeah. Well, I had the example of growing up with my parents and my siblings being together at the various sports events. And it's been fun for my wife, Tavia, and I to get to recreate that. We've got 3 great children, sort of out of the house. We're close to being empty nesters.
I'm not sure that ever happens, by the way.
And all 3 of them are great fans of FC Dallas and the Chiefs. And we love being able to get together at games on the weekends. We're sort of that stage in life where they're going in different directions, but we'll still come together to attend Chiefs games and root on the Chiefs.
So you had up a large operation, got multifaceted with the sports. We talked about the MLS, but especially the NFL, with all of the visibility that it receives in our economy and in our society today. As you go back to that growing up stage, what lessons have you taken that you saw your father lead the organization really as an entrepreneur and then build it up as the league came up? Are there any specific lessons that you kind of have taken forward that you said, okay, that was something I want to make sure that when I'm in that position, I'm doing the same sort of things?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just have to say what an incredible visionary, an entrepreneur my dad was, and somebody who had tremendous perseverance and patience. Because starting pro sports leagues or starting sports franchises is really challenging. And there are a lot of ups, a lot of downs, probably more downs than ups. And he was willing to fight through that to make sure that his various businesses and ventures were successful. He was an incredibly detail-oriented person. We still have in our archives hundreds, if not thousands, of memos that he would send to the various people in the business, just noting things that he had seen or thought of and wanted them to think about implementing. He was also a very special leader, and something that I saw him model was being a servant leader. He was a very humble person, and because of that, the people that worked for him were literally willing to run through walls for him because they loved him so much. And I don't think I really appreciated that when I was young, but as I got older and started thinking more about leadership and the qualities that you need, that one really stood out to me. He was also somebody who cared a lot about the fans. And if you wanted to point to one lesson that I learned from him, it's that pro sports teams are really about the fans. It's easy to think, oh, they're about the players and they're about the coaches, and that's certainly important. But at the end of the day, you need to think about your customer, and that's the fans, and that's what my dad did every single day that he was involved in pro sports.
You mentioned the visionary part, and we see the NFL today as the dominant sport, clearly in the United States, but with the work that's being done pushing into other areas of the world too. But back in the 50s and the 60s, that wasn't the case. Tell us the story, and I've heard you tell it before, but I think it's so representative of that visionary comment that you made of how your dad, interested in sports, but looked at football in an era where television was just taking off and said, you know, the combination of those two, there's a future here.
So my dad, after he graduated from SMU, went to work for his father, who was in the oil and gas business. Mm-hmm. And after a few years, he just decided that just wasn't what he wanted to do with the rest of his career. Instead, he wanted to switch and do something he had a passion in, and that was professional sports. He had grown up playing both baseball and football and loved them both. Went to SMU and played football, at least on the freshman team. He sat on the bench for 3 or 4 years after that. But he loved both sports. And
I guess he contributed a lot more to football than the rest of the team did when all's said and done.
In the late 1950s, he was thinking about, okay, do I want to try to start a pro baseball team or a pro football team in Dallas? And in December of 1958, he was watching the NFL championship game on TV between the Giants and the Colts. And it was a very famous championship game, tremendous game. And he was actually in a hotel room in Houston when he watched the game. And he said, you know what? This game televises really well, and that might be important. Which would be one of the all-time understatements, right? He was exactly right about that. I think that's one of the reasons the NFL has been so successful is the game was just made for television. So he made the decision at that point to pursue a professional football team. And unfortunately, that didn't go well for quite a while because the NFL told him two things. First of all, we're not interested in expanding. And secondly, Dallas, Texas is a horrible market for pro football. I mean, that's literally what Burt Bell, the commissioner of the NFL,
another visionary statement.
Told him. And, my dad was very frustrated by that. And after trying to buy a team, the Chicago Cardinals, which is the same team that now plays in Arizona, by the way.
Now, was that the Bidwell family back then?
It was same family. My dad had been to see the owner in Miami, and he'd visited this person 2 or 3 times and been told no every time. And he was flying home back to Dallas on an American Airlines flight, and he said it was like a light bulb went off in my head because through meeting with the owner of the Cardinals, he had heard that there were other people that were trying to buy the Cardinals. And my dad said, look, if there are other people who are interested in a team for their city, I'm going to start a new league. And so he asked the stewardess for some stationery, and he took that American Airlines stationery and drafted the business plan for the American Football League.
Incredible.
Which that document's obviously in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
We have a copy of it as well in our Hall of Honor in Kansas City. And from that moment forward, he went about recruiting people to be a part of the American Football League and ultimately got it all pulled together and launched the league in 1960.
With a franchise in Dallas?
Yes, his franchise was in Dallas. It was the Dallas Texans.
Yep.
So walk us forward then from Dallas Texans to Kansas City, and then what happened with the NFL, kind of maybe rethinking their thoughts?
Yeah. So during this process, when my dad was trying to organize the American Football League, the NFL at first acted like they didn't care. And they largely took that stance because they were under antitrust scrutiny from Congress. In fact, my dad went to a hearing in Washington where Burt Bell, the commissioner of the NFL, was being questioned by Congress. And Burt Bell said, we're all about competition. In fact, Lamar Hunt, who is sitting in the back of this courtroom, is going to start a new league, and we're so supportive of that. And my dad was shocked because there had not been a public announcement of the American Football League. That was the first time that the world came to know.
And when was this?
This was late 1958, early 1959, right in that time frame. And my dad was shocked, but anyhow, he continued on his pursuit of getting it pulled together. And sure enough, the NFL, after thinking about it some more over the coming months, decided that maybe a new league that they'd have to compete with wasn't such a great idea. And they made the decision to start a team in Dallas because the best way to put the American Football League out of business was to put the founder, Lamar Hunt, out of business. And so that's how the Dallas Cowboys were created. They recruited Clint Murchison to be the owner. And so in 1960, not one but 2 pro football teams started playing in Dallas, both in the Cotton Bowl.
In this city that was supposed to be a horrible TV market and a horrible market overall.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, just tremendous irony there.
So fast forward a little bit. I think there's a neat story about ultimately the leagues come together and there's this creation of this thing called the Super Bowl. Can you tell us how that all kind of came to be and how it was named?
Yeah, sure. So with the 2 leagues competing in the 1960s, the war between them just really escalated. There was competition not only for fans, but there was competition for the players. There were actually 2 drafts, so a lot of players would be drafted by the NFL and drafted by the AFL. And then there was a big battle to see who could be signed. and that just caused salaries to escalate and escalate. And so by the time we get to the mid-1960s, the NFL decides that, we've got to make peace and we've got to figure out how to merge these two leagues. So they reached out to my dad, and he had a meeting here in a car parked at Love Field with one of the representatives from the Cowboys who had been sent to tell him that, look, we're ready to merge. And so they sort of talked through the terms of the merger at Love Field. And later in 1966, they began having meetings to try to formally figure out how to merge the two leagues. In one of those meetings, they were talking about this new championship game that would be needed because there was an AFL champion and an NFL champion. Now you needed a new championship game. And one of the owners asked my dad, which game are you talking about? Are you talking about one of the conference championship games, or are you talking about this new championship game? My dad just said, no, I'm talking about, the last game, the final game, the Super Bowl. And he just threw it out there. And everybody in the room sort of, sat back and looked at him, and then they went back to their business. Pete Rozelle, who was the commissioner of the NFL by this time, heard about it, and he hated it. In fact, he actively disliked it because he thought it was unsophisticated. And that is the reason why the first two Super Bowls were called the AFL-NFL World Championship game. And it wasn't until we get to Super Bowl III where the NFL really began to adopt the term Super Bowl.
And that was the first time the AFL, quote unquote, won.
That's right. The AFL won that game. Joe Namath and the Jets won that game. And then the next year, my dad's Chiefs beat the Minnesota Vikings. And then by the end of that year, which was the 1969 season, the two leagues were fully merged from that point forward. My dad was later asked, where in the world did Super Bowl come from? And my dad said, well, I'm a big fan of college football, and I've been to a bunch of bowl games, particularly Cotton Bowl games. He'd gone to 30 or 40 straight Cotton Bowl games at one point in his life. And my wife bought these new toys for our children this past Christmas, and my kids were bouncing them all over the house. And I think, that it just stuck in my mind, and that new toy was a Super Bowl. So that's where the Super came from, and he just merged it with Bowl, and that's how we got Super Bowl.
So you're a role in it.
So I was alive, and my mom did buy me one, but I was literally 1 year old. And so
won you. Yeah.
I don't think I was bouncing mine over the house. I think it was my older siblings who deserve the credit for that.
But you got to fill in a hole. Two teams in Dallas, Kansas City Chiefs. How did we get to Kansas City?
Yeah. So after my dad's Texans had been in Dallas for 3 seasons, the competition with the Cowboys was fierce. Both of them were playing at the Cotton Bowl. Neither one of them averaged many fans. They were averaging under 10,000 fans a game, which is hard to envision today.
So crazy.
In fact, my dad was sure that the Cowboys were fudging their numbers, and so he would go to their games and hand count the number of fans at the Cowboy games so he could tell the paper exactly how many were there. Anyhow, needless to say, both teams were struggling financially off the field, even though my dad's Texans were a very good team on the field. They won the 1962 AFL championship. But by the end of that season, he decided that he wanted to move to a city where he would be the only team, and the city could really embrace him. And the mayor in Kansas City had reached out to him and really had done a good job of courting him and said, look, if you come here, we'll help you sell season tickets. We'll help you find a long-term stadium solution. And so in the spring of 1963, my dad moved the team to Kansas City. First, he wanted to keep the Texans name, but the president of the team said, Lamar, I don't think that's such a great idea. And so they had to name the team contest and ended up with the Chiefs.
And these years since, one of the most successful franchises. Where did Kingdom come from?
That was a term that we started using about 20 years ago to describe our fan base. And I don't know exactly who to give credit for that, but our fan base really embraced it and loved it. And, we've taken and expanded, and we have a fan base that now literally spans the globe.
Oh, yeah.
So the Chiefs kingdom is very broad.
So I want to fast forward again. You've obviously had an incredible run, call it the last decade, 8 to 10 years or so. Talk us through ultimately how Brett Veach and Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, these iconic names really now associated with the NFL, both in the front office and on the field, how this all came together, how it all formed.
Well, after my father passed away at the end of 2006, I took over the leadership of the team. And we'd had a bunch of very average years, and unfortunately, it was going to get worse before it got better.
Sure.
And between 2007 and 2012, we had some really difficult years. 2-14 and 4-12 seasons that were just really tough. And by the time we got to the end of the 2012 season, I knew that we needed a change in leadership, and it was going to involve both the head coaching position as well as the general manager. And historically at the Chiefs, the reporting structure had been that the owner would hire the general manager and the general manager would hire the head coach. And what I had found in my 5 years leading the team was that really disconnected me from the head coach. And so I made a decision to change the reporting structure to have both the head coach and the GM report
Before
directly.
you filled either of the slots.
Yes. Yeah. It was one of those decisions I needed to make before I went about that hiring process. Because I should mention, in 2009, I had hired a general manager to replace one of our general managers who'd been with us for a long time. And I had maintained the old reporting structure. And that's where I just noticed there was this real disconnect. And we didn't make a good decision on the coach that we hired for the 2009 season. I really wasn't part of that interview process until the very end. And this go round, I wanted to be the person who was selecting the head coach. So we make this change in structure, and by an incredible blessing, the Philadelphia Eagles made the decision to fire Andy Reid. And Andy had an incredible 14-year run as the head coach of the Eagles, had taken them to 4 conference championship games, had made 1 Super Bowl, that unfortunately didn't win it, but he'd really done well there. But the last couple of years, the success had tailed off a little bit, and he'd had some personal tragedy in his family as well in his last year in Philadelphia. So the one question I had in my mind as we started the interview process with him was whether he was ready to jump back in, because it had been such a hard year.
But you really saw Andy at that point as kind of your lead candidate, at least?
So absolutely. I mean, you very rarely get a coach who's been that successful still in the prime of his career. But many pundits around the NFL were really down on him. And they were saying, Andy really needs to step back, take a year or 2 away from the game, and then come back. So we set up multiple interviews the first week following the regular season. And Andy was in the middle of that on a Wednesday. And I took my team to Philadelphia, and we interviewed him in the FBO in Philadelphia. And it was supposed to be about a 3 or 4 hour interview.
And he was actually going to leave later that day for an interview on the West Coast, right?
Yeah. He had 2 more interviews set up. One with the Arizona Cardinals and one with the San Diego Chargers. And I didn't know that at the time. But I did notice that there was a plane sitting out on the tarmac that had its door open. And, we get to sort of the 3 hour, 4 hour mark, and he and I both discovered that we just had tremendous chemistry. And I think we both had a sense that, hey, this is probably going to work out. And so he made the decision not to get on that plane. And again, I didn't know this at the time, but our interview ends up going 9 hours, if you can believe that. just to show you what good chemistry there was.
So what did you? So a 9-hour interview for largely one of the highest visible positions in the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
Talk about that interview. How did you structure it? How did you go in? What did you want to know about? And how did this play out over the course of 9 hours?
Yeah. Well, I had brought our team with us. So it wasn't just me because I wanted to give him exposure to all the senior leaders in the Chiefs organization because I knew that would be important to him. And I wanted my team's input on what they thought. We had one really distinct advantage, which was the president of the club, whose name is Mark Donovan. He's still with us, had worked in Philadelphia with Andy. Andy also knew our PR director, Ted Cruz. They had intersected at some Super Bowls in the past. So having the two of them in the room was very helpful. And, in terms of things that we talked about, we obviously talked a lot about football, talked a lot about his family. He wanted to know a lot of things about my family, about me, wanted to know about our facilities. And, we covered all that, and he had those conversations with the team as well. I think, one of the most important things that I learned from it was he was ready to get going again. He thought the best thing for his family was not to sit out, but was to get right back in it, because that's sort of what his family does and had been doing for a long time, and he thought it would be best mentally for him to do it. And I could just tell that he was the kind of experienced, mature leader that we needed at that point. We actually had some pretty good players. We had 6 players make the Pro Bowl coming out of 2012, which is very hard to do when you only win 2 games. Yeah, so there was some talent on our roster, and Andy saw that, felt we needed to upgrade at the quarterback position, which he was able to do. And he joins the organization, and in 2013, we win 9 straight games to open the season. If you can just imagine the contrast, from going from winning 2 games the entire season in 2012 to now winning 9 straight games, just shows you what a great coach he is.
But you made an organizational decision of how to have that head coach report to you. Not a lot of franchises do that. I don't think you're the only one, but not a lot do that and had a separate reporting relationship. But coming off of 4 years of 2-4 wins, and being a relatively new owner in the NFL, that squarely put everything on your shoulders, though. It couldn't be, okay, I blame the general manager because the coach didn't work out, et cetera, et cetera. That squarely put everything on your shoulders.
You're exactly right. I tried not to think too much about that. I just felt it was the right thing to do. And, fortunately, it worked out perfectly. I got exactly the person that we needed in Andy Reid. We also hired John Dorsey as our general manager, somebody that Andy had known. And that's really one
that came after the hiring of Andy.
It did. And that's one of the tough things in pro sports is to get your GM and your head coach to work together, because you typically have 2 guys that are alpha males. They obviously are very knowledgeable. They know the sport, and they think they have all the answers. And so getting them to work together is tough. But in John, we found somebody that Andy trusted and had some experience with. And John did a great job, helped us draft many of the players who have helped us win Super Bowls over the last 5 or 6 years. And then about 6 or so years ago, John left the organization, and we elevated Brett Veach into the general manager position.
Just hired from within.
Yeah. And Brett had been part of a lot of those decisions on the players that we had drafted, including Patrick Mahomes. Brett was really the one who had pushed that internally in the organization.
Talk about that, because that wasn't, and today it is.
Great decision.
When you see Mahomes operate. But back then, that wasn't a slam dunk. And in fact, he really sat on the bench for a period of time, kind of being groomed.
Yeah, exactly right. So going back to 2017, Brett Veach, who I mentioned, who was in our personnel department, had been showing clips of Patrick Mahomes to Andy Reid. Brett came with Andy from Philadelphia.
So what did Andy think of that at that point?
He said after a while, he's like, Brett, I get it. Yeah, so I get it. I've seen enough tape. But it was literally every week at Tech, Patrick would do something where you just go, wow. And Brett wanted to make sure Andy saw it. And by the time we get to the draft in April of 2017, Andy's on board and John Dorsey, our general manager's on board. All we had to do was figure out how to get Patrick because we had about the 27th pick in that draft, and we felt that you would need to be in the top 10 to get him. Initially, people had talked about Patrick as a second-round pick, and then we get close to the draft, and now he's a late first-round pick. Then we get to the weeks before the draft, and all of a sudden everybody's like, hey, Patrick may be top 10. And we
was that the combine that changed it, or was it just kind of talk within the league?
I think it was people getting more comfortable with the fact that Patrick's skill set could be conformed to the NFL. There had been a lot of Texas Tech quarterbacks who'd come to the NFL and had not been successful. And they were referred to as system quarterbacks. But I think
for the most part at that time, the NFL was a drop back type of quarterback, not a lot of running at that point.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There was a very singular view on what a great quarterback looked like, a lot like Tom Brady, right? As a matter of fact. But in that draft, there were three really outstanding quarterbacks. We definitely had Patrick at the top of our list, and we worked out a trade with the Buffalo Bills a few days before the draft, where if our guy was on the board, we were going to move up to the 10th spot and take him. Now, we had to lay a little bit of a smokescreen because we didn't want the rest of the league to know we were going up to get Patrick, because we thought there were teams at 11, 12, and 13 who might take him ahead of us. And it would have been very easy for them to just jump over us. We move up to 10, they jump us, they get the 9th pick and take him. So we convinced the league that we were going to draft a linebacker. There was a really good linebacker out of the University of Alabama that year. And that's what everybody thought. And we got on the clock with that 10th pick, execute the trade with Buffalo, and we move up and take Patrick, and the rest is history.
It is history.
Incredible. Okay, so give us, and I want to go back just a tad here. Did you lay out with Andy and the crew, did you lay out a strategic vision for what you wanted the Chiefs to be, or was it, hey, we're just going to take this as it comes, and we're going to go from 2-14 to winning 9 games in a row to starting the season? Like, walk us through how you thought about molding the franchise around Andy's skill set as a coach, and then also the new GM as well.
Well, I think one of the most important things that Andy did when he came was he completely changed the culture. And it was something that I had began to work on in 2007 in terms of creating a culture where there was more accountability. Even though the Chiefs had a lot of success in the 90s and the early 2000s, one of the things that I noticed immediately was there was a real lack of accountability. And Andy just embodies that. He's all about the details. He's about accountability. He's about treating all the employees, including the players, with tremendous respect. I think one of the things you'll find for any player who ever played for Andy is they have tremendous respect for him because Andy treated them like a man. He didn't always tell them good news, but he told them the truth. And that's what they wanted to hear. And I knew those were qualities that Andy was bringing. And so on the football side of the operation, the great thing was I didn't have to try to do anything. In fact, for my role, it's really hard to do that. That's got to come from your head coach and ideally from the leaders in your locker room. And part of getting that right is making sure you have the right type of leaders in the locker room. And we had some good ones going all the way back to Andy's first year. So Alex Smith, we got to talk about Alex. We traded with the 49ers.
Well thought of quarterback.
Yeah, and brought him in. And he had 5 great years with us, including his best year in 2012, Pro Bowl quarterback. And we draft Patrick, and we have them both together for the 2018 season. And you mentioned earlier that Patrick didn't start right away. And again, I think that was part of Andy's genius in how he developed Patrick, because he knew Patrick was young. He was 21 years old when he came out. And being able to watch an experienced professional like Alex Smith, he felt that was something that could help Patrick be the best version of himself. So Patrick doesn't play that first year until the last game of the season when we'd already clinched the division. And he comes in, we were at Denver, and had a really good game, did some special things. And I think it was at that moment we were like, okay, this guy's going to be pretty good.
But if you think about the relationships, that creating that culture, the relationship between Alex Smith and Patrick Holmes, I think you would say it was a positive one. And I think of Rodgers, Favre, Rodgers, Love, et cetera. Those didn't quite turn out the same way. How did you create that environment where two individuals where one must see the young person coming along, but nevertheless cares enough about the team that they work together to make the season a success?
Yeah, well, I think really the credit goes to Alex on that. And Alex had seen those other teams and had seen how that environment could be tough. He'd lived that a little bit himself with the 49ers. And Andy didn't tell him, look, you have to teach Patrick how to be a starting quarterback. Andy just told Alex, just be yourself and have the best year of your career. Which he ended up doing, amazingly. But in the process, he was teaching Patrick how to be a professional. And Patrick's a tremendous student, right? And somebody who cares about the details, cares about being the best he can be. And he learned a lot of that from Alex that first year in 2018. And then we traded Alex on to Washington, and Patrick became the full-time starter in 2018, and we've never looked back.
So you started with pretty austere years, as you said, when you first took over, and then all of a sudden, you've got a lot of confetti coming down around you, and you're holding this big silver thing. Quite a ride.
It's been amazing. We definitely feel very blessed as a family. I feel like the Lord has just brought all these tremendous people into our organization and into our family's life. And they're people who love working together, people who have a common goal, people who have great values. And I really attribute the success we've had to them.
It's tough enough to become number one. It's another exercise to stay number one. And, you must be dealing with a lot of distractions now that have come with that success. I think there's an insurance company that's doing pretty well with a couple of your folks. There's a fast food chain that's doing well. And there's some rumor that there's one of your players is engaged to a dancer or something. I don't know what the whole story is on that. How do you deal with the distractions of success? And again, focus on the objective in 2025 of winning another Super Bowl.
Yeah. I would say it's become challenging for sure. If you just look at everything that's going on around the team, if you go back a couple decades in the NFL, the business side really didn't intrude into the football side. The two tended to be more separate, and most NFL teams, the football side really kept the business side at arm's length. That has changed, not only in the NFL, but across professional sports, because fans now want to see behind the scenes. They're no longer content just to show up on Sunday and watch the game. They want to get to know the personalities. And then you have these external factors like having Taylor Swift dating our star tight end, the fact that we were pursuing our third Lombardi Trophy in a row last year, something that had never been done in the NFL. In fact, we literally all had cameras everywhere to create a documentary on the year, which is called The Kingdom,
which was great.
Debuted in August, and I think they did an amazing job. But our head coach, even though he's adaptable, he's a little bit old school, and he likes to limit distractions, which I think is true of every head coach. But he also understands the time that we're playing in right now, and the fact that he's got to be more open-minded and got to be willing to have some distractions. And I think it really gets back to the importance of the leadership in your locker room. There's a time to practice hard and play hard, and there's a time for all the other stuff. And I think Patrick and Travis and Chris Jones and the other leaders on the team,
separation.
Yeah, they do a really good job of knowing when it's time to focus and bear down and when it's time for some of this other stuff.
Yeah, I think you give a lot of credit to the players, but I think there's some credit due to yourself and obviously your front office. You've set a new culture, you've run with it, and you've exemplified what it means to lead in the NFL and to grow a great organization. I want to step outside the Chiefs just for a second. So I want to talk about the expansion of the NFL into international markets and kind of where you see the game moving forward. I think there's multiple games now every weekend, it seems like, that's in Berlin or it's in
Dublin,
or it's somewhere. Sao Paulo, I think, was this year. Y'all started the year there.
Yeah.
Talk about the expansion of the NFL and where that's headed.
Yeah, so it's a major initiative that's been 3 or 4 decades in the making. In fact, if you go back 40 or so years, my dad was on the NFL International Committee and was a big proponent of us growing the game internationally because at some point there's only so many fans in North America. The NFL first tackled the opportunity by playing preseason games internationally. The Chiefs were a leader in that. Played in Tokyo twice. We played in Berlin. We played in Monterrey, Mexico. And this is all back in the late 80s and early 90s. Then the NFL tried establishing a league in Europe, which was known as NFL Europe, and ultimately that wasn't successful. So fast forward to about 15 years ago, I joined the NFL International Committee, and it was at a time where the league was thinking about playing some regular games overseas. And the first opportunity was in London at Wembley Stadium.
And you really put your hand up of the Chiefs would be part of it, right?
Yeah.
At a time when not a lot of owners were in that position.
Yeah. And you're exactly right. There were a lot of teams that didn't want to play internationally. And, we definitely raised our hand and say, hey, we want to be one of the ones that gets to do this. We think it's a great opportunity for our brand. And we eventually had that opportunity to play at Wembley in 2015. But anyhow, over the last 15 or so years, the league has steadily grown the number of these games that are happening each year. This year, there are 7 games being played internationally. We've gone to new markets like Brazil. This was the NFL's second year in Brazil, and that was a tremendous experience for us to get to do that. I was shocked by how many fans the Chiefs have down there and how knowledgeable they were. It was a real eye-opening experience for me. So that was really exciting. And next year, the league's going to go to Spain, going to go to Australia, I think eventually to the Mideast. And, who knows where from there.
So but where does this go? I think the agreement allows you to go to 8 games with discussions of going to 10. What's the end point? Is it to have a team that literally competes in the NFL that's domiciled in Europe, some other place? Is it to go back, you mentioned the NFL Europe, to have some type of a league and try that again? What's the objective, or is it just to get exposure and fans that wear this jersey in Berlin?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, the objective is to grow the brand of the NFL in all 32 franchises. And it not only involves playing games. So the NFL about 5 or 6 years ago gave the teams the right to ask for the rights to market in different countries. It was called the home marketing program at that time. And the Chiefs were awarded Germany, and Mexico to start with. We later added Austria and Switzerland as part of our grouping with Germany, and have recently added the UK and Ireland and may in the future think about adding Brazil. So it's something we're very focused on. It's
There's countries in the 17th century that would have loved to have had that expansion of territory.
Yeah. You're exactly right. And we just see it as a great opportunity for us to grow the Chiefs brand. It's not inexpensive, right? You have to present the league with a business plan and go execute against that business plan, which involves, spending some money on a grassroots basis, some local marketing, and we're doing that in all those markets. But the way you really accelerate it is you take your players and your coaches there and you play a game. I mean that obviously is the best way to sell yourself. And so it's an opportunity that I think will continue to grow. Maybe we go from 8 games eventually to 16, so that in a season, every team is playing 1 game internationally. Potentially at some point, could there be a team in Europe? I don't see why not. I think the travel would be tough.
Mm-hmm.
And so, figuring out how to work that out would have to happen. That's not something that's on the near-term burner,
okay.
But it's something that certainly could happen at some point.
But let's look at it from the Chiefs standpoint. So you've identified additional markets. How do you monetize those? Because they probably they're not enough are going to come over to Kansas City to come to games. They'll get some jerseys and that sort of thing. But you said it's a big investment. You're spending a lot of time. How do you monetize something like that to get the value for the Kansas City Chiefs organization?
On a short-term basis, the teams are allowed to have sponsors. So in many of those markets, we have sponsors. We were really one of the first teams to Germany, and we've got a great sponsorship base there. I think long-term, you're building value through the brand.
And sponsorship there is they're just able to use the Kansas City Chiefs logo, et cetera, in their advertisements.
That's right. Yeah, they're able to use our marks in their advertisement, and we'll do grassroots things with them as well. But long term, it's really about the brand growth and having a big brand. Certainly, you're going to have some of those fans come to Kansas City and attend Chiefs games. So long term, there's an economic opportunity there. But in the short term, it's really about sponsorship.
Okay, the NFL. I guess. Look at kind of your neighbors in Kansas City, the Kansas City Royals. Tough exercise. Small market, Yankees, Dodgers on the 2 coasts, those sorts of things.
Salary caps.
The NFL is structured much differently with the television money. I guess we go back again to that game your dad was watching in 58, 59 in Houston. The NFL went a very different way. They took the television money and basically said it's a league, we're going to split it across. Talk about the implications of that in a smaller market like Kansas City, what it allows you to do, but also what that's going to mean for the future of the NFL and the ability to grow, vis-a-vis maybe even baseball.
Yeah. Well, I think you again have to go back to my dad and the many things that he contributed to the NFL. So it was his idea to have the TV money split evenly among the franchises. And when the 2 leagues merged, the merged league adopted that perspective. And it's really one of those things you have to do up front, because once you get going and you have hundreds of millions of dollars of disparity.
Talk to baseball today.
Yeah.
The Yankees and the Dodgers, that's not a popular conversation.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that's something that's really held baseball back, is every year there are really only a handful of franchises that have a chance of winning the championship. Yeah. Where in the NFL, literally every year, everybody has an opportunity. My dad was all about giving resources to the teams that had struggled the year before. So in the draft, the teams that did the worst get the first draft. So it gives you a better chance to get better fast.
Parity is what Rozelle always advocated back when.
Yeah. If you look at how the schedule is constructed, if you finished at the top of your division the year before, you're going to be playing the division winners from the other divisions the next year. So you have a tougher schedule. It's something that I feel very unhappy about every year because we're getting the Baltimores and the Buffaloes and the Eagles, every year. But
the
again,
Lions didn't turn out too bad.
Yeah. No, with that one turned out all right for sure. But there's just a very different business model between baseball and football. And my dad gets a lot of the credit, and I think it's why the NFL is where it is today from a business standpoint.
Fascinating.
You're dealing with the tough decision now in Kansas City. You've got a stadium that is, I think probably the best description is loved. Here's one for you. Of all the sports stadiums, what has had the loudest crowd? Arrowhead. Decibels of 142, which was the record. Standing next to a jet engine is 140, to give you a feel of that. So a loved, and that stadium kind of is conducive to that too. You've got a tough decision going forward on what do we do on stadiums. Don't want to get into the details, but give us a thought on how you approach a decision like that, which is a 30 or 40-year decision. And for some franchises, it kind of be easy to a new stadium, but you've got one that your kingdom loves.
You're beloved.
Yeah. So we do have a very tough decision in front of us. Arrowhead is now about 54, 55 years old. And as you mentioned, it is beloved by sports fans around the world. When I go walk our parking lots, I'm always shocked to meet people, from Canada or from Europe who've come because it's on their bucket list. It's one of those sports facilities that everybody wants to come to at least once, and our fans love it. We have an amazing tailgating culture. And so as we think about the next 25, 30 plus years, we're weighing whether it makes more sense to renovate Arrowhead again. We did a renovation in 2009, 2010, which really modernized the building and has helped us stay competitive over the last 20 years. But we've got to make the same decision going forward, whether a renovation makes the most sense or whether building a new stadium somewhere else in the community would be a better decision.
Have you looked at, or have they talked to you, Manchester United? Because in some ways they're facing the exact same decision. Again, not in London, in Manchester, beloved stadium, but a potential to have 100,000 capacity stadium in a very different situation, but lose some of that Old Trafford feel.
Sure. Ironically, I attended a Man U game in January with my son. My son played soccer at SMU, and his career was over come the end of the SMU season, and he wanted to go see some games in London. So I took him to Old Trafford. And on that trip, they actually mentioned that they were thinking about what to do next, whether another renovation or build a new stadium. So, it's a very tough decision because a building like Old Trafford has a lot of history.
And the emotions are there. I did the same thing. I took my son last year and we went and saw 2 games. A little bit different watching a Premier League versus NFL. The opposing team has to have 2 rings of police officers standing around them. I haven't seen that in an NFL stadium lately.
Not yet. Let's move on to soccer. Obviously, family involvement for decades.
Good bridge on that. That was a nice touch.
Was nice.
Yeah, that was a good
wasn't
touch.
That easy? It was good. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for setting me up. Let's move on to soccer, and let's talk actually the World Cup. So World Cup comes next year, and it's returning first time since I think 94. And Arrowhead is one of the places that's going to get to host World Cup matches. Talk to us about
and you're chairing that, and your brother's chairing the effort here in Dallas.
Right. Yeah. So talk to us about the family involvement in bringing the World Cup back and the excitement for what's to come, call it next summer.
Yeah. Well, again, I have to go back and talk about my dad because he's
a
really,
visionary.
He really is, sort of the father of pro soccer in the United States. As well recognized he is for his contributions to the NFL. He really did as much or more for soccer, which started with him owning the Dallas Tornado here in Dallas, which played from the late 60s into the early 80s. Unfortunately, that league went out of business, but when the World Cup was here in 94, part of the mandate from FIFA for the U.S. getting that World Cup was to start a new Division I league. And of course, the first person to raise his hand and say, I want in, was my dad. He just believed in the sport's future here in the United States.
And then that was an involvement in both Columbus, Kansas City, and in Dallas.
Yeah. We started out with MLS teams in Columbus and Kansas City, and 3 or 4 years into the league, we ended up adding Dallas. So we had 3 teams we were running at the time, which frankly was too many. Hard enough to run one well, but running 3 was well. And we eventually sold Columbus and Kansas City to local investors, and have ended up with that FC Dallas. But going back to the '94 World Cup, one of my dad's disappointments was that Kansas City and Arrowhead were not selected. My dad did share the effort here in Dallas and loved every minute of that, but I knew he was always sad that his favorite place on earth, which was Arrowhead Stadium, did not get to host a World Cup game in '94. So fast forward to the tournament next year, we're delighted to have 6 games in Kansas City. It's going to be absolutely transformational.
Which is the stadium, that's one of the higher numbers, I think.
Yeah,
the highest number in any stadium is 9.
9, right, which there are going to be 9 games here in Dallas, which is fantastic. But we're excited to host those games in Kansas City, and it's literally going to put Kansas City on the global map.
Yeah, it's incredible. So talk to us about the difference in kind of the business side. Obviously, you've got the NFL that is ripping and roaring here in the United States and now globally. Soccer is really more of a European kind of first sport in a lot of ways. The MLS has grown and made significant strides. But talk to us about, you've run 3 teams, now you run 1. What are the differences, and what do you see for the future, and hope that the World Cup can be another catalyst, as it was in '94, another catalyst moving forward?
Yeah, so there are a lot of similarities between a soccer franchise and a football franchise, and there are a lot of differences. Clearly, the NFL as an established league is much more mature. And the MLS, which we're in our 30th season at this point, but for pro sports leagues, that's actually still very young. We're very much of a challenger league in the context of sports here in the United States. Now, MLS is probably the fastest growing pro sport in the U.S. at this point, but we're coming from a small base, so it's easier to grow off a small base. But over the last 30 years, the fan base in the U.S. for soccer has grown tremendously. And you mentioned the World Cup. Every country that's hosted a World Cup always gets a huge boost for their local soccer league. And so that's something that MLS is excited about, is getting that boost. There'll be many, many players who play in the World Cup who play for MLS franchises, probably somewhere between 40 and 60. So the fans who learn to love those players playing World Cup matches can go to the local MLS team and get to see many of those same players on the field playing in MLS.
What does MLS need to do to really use that as a quantum leap?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any secret sauce, but it's the awareness
exposure, visibility
of the sport, right? The quality of play in MLS has grown tremendously over the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
And depending on who you ask, the league is now in the top 6 or 7 in the world in terms of quality of play. So the league is very, very competitive. And the fans here in the U.S., for the most part, are pretty savvy. They get to watch a lot of soccer games, whether it's World Cup matches or their favorite club team playing in the Premier League or the Bundesliga or somewhere in South America. So they do have reference points, and it's important that when they turn on an MLS match, that the quality of play is there. And that's something that we've really focused on and will continue to do. Having star players in the league like Messi is really, really important. You just can't say enough about the lift and visibility that Lionel Messi has given MLS.
Those Miami games are raucous.
Yeah. You've shown your dedication and passion to football, to MLS, to what you're doing from a professional standpoint. You talked about your family, but your faith is at the front. Talk a little bit about your faith and how that influences your family, the work you do in Kansas City, the work you do here with the MLS.
Yeah. So I was very lucky to grow up in a family that not only loves sports, but also put their faith in Christ first. And I really saw my parents model that. And I became a Christian when I was very young at Pine Cove Camp, and then grew in my faith from there at Kanakuk camps each summer. And, from a leadership standpoint with the Chiefs, one of the things that I've really enjoyed about the NFL is it's very welcoming to the Christian faith. We have many believers on the team. We're lucky to have a great chaplain in Kansas City, and have had for many, many decades. We've had great chaplains. My family does a lot with Athletes in Action, and they've been very instrumental in getting chaplains into most of the NFL teams. And in fact, my dad helped Major League Soccer, when it gets started, make sure that they had chaplains at all the MLS teams, which Athletes in Action, provided those chaplains. So anyhow, the NFL is a place where the Christian faith is welcomed, and we obviously have believers, from many different backgrounds. Not all Christian, but it's something that Andy Reid, has embraced. We say the Lord's Prayer after every game in the locker room at Andy's leadership. So it's something that's very important to my family. It's very important to our organization, and I think many of us who are in the business like to say, faith, family, and football, and how they go together.
The owners at the top, do you have players and coaches come talk to you about your faith?
Occasionally, yes. And one of the guys that I've enjoyed seeing grow so much in his faith has been Patrick Mahomes. He was raised in a Christian family, and I've seen him be more demonstrative, of his faith here across the years. And anytime that I have an opportunity to have that conversation, it's always special.
Yeah.
Something I love doing when the team's on the road is attending the chapel service the night before.
So there's a chapel service night before?
Night before, right. Yeah, chapel service the night before the game for the players and coaches.
Led by the chaplain with a message, prayer time?
Yes.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the neat things I think you'll do is on game days, you host a worship service right next to Arrowhead Stadium. Talk about the idea and the inception of that.
Yeah, so going back again, sort of 15 plus years when I took over the leadership, something that had always troubled me is that the Chiefs in those days typically played at noon, and for our fans to get the game, they had to leave home probably at 9 a.m. and weren't having a chance to go to a church service. And we have a pavilion that my dad actually built some 20 years ago right next to the stadium, and we weren't using part of that facility for anything on game day. And so I said, hey, why can't we have a chapel service for our fans? I know that the players are getting fed through a chapel service the night before. Let's do something for the fans on game day. So that's a tradition that we started, 15 or so years ago.
What kind of attendance do you get?
We usually have 200 to 300 attend that a couple hours before the game. One of the challenges we've had recently is we don't play at noon very much anymore because the NFL has us in the primetime windows. But this coming week against the Raiders, we have a noon game, and we're going to have the chapel service at 10 a.m.
Okay, well, let's kind of end it on the football side. So where we stand today is we're 3-3. 2-3, kind of a tough season starting. So let's go back to last year. As you mentioned, 2 Super Bowls, favored. First one, you weren't favored. You were favored in this one. Didn't come about. Talk about the emotions of those 2 years, the high point, and then all of a sudden, the chance to get that third one didn't come about. What was the emotion that evening, you and the team? And then the next day, what did you do with Andy and the rest of the team to say, okay, we're going to come back in 2025?
So obviously, not closing the deal and getting that third straight Lombardi was incredibly disappointing for the entire franchise. We had a very unique year because we won so many games that were really close.
Yeah.
It's like margins.
Yeah. I think at one point we'd won 17 straight one-score games.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was an NFL record and absolutely amazing. So it wasn't like we were being dominant, but we were always figuring out a way to get it done. And we got to the Super Bowl, and as our head coach said, it was a bad day to have a bad day, right? We just did not play well. Got to give a lot of credit to the Philadelphia Eagles because that was an awesome football team. And even if we'd played better, who knows what the result would have been. So we were all crushed. The day after the game, I intentionally did not call Andy because we were all so disappointed. What I find in those situations is you need to give everybody a little bit of time to get past the emotions because you're not going to make good decisions while you still have those emotions. But as I met with not only Andy but Brett Veach, our general manager, in the weeks after the Super Bowl, we knew we had some areas that we had to improve if we were going to be able to get back there. We needed to focus more on our wide receiver room, where we'd had a lot of injuries last year, and then also the left side of our offensive line. And I think Brett did a masterful job in the offseason of strengthening the offensive line and adding weapons to the receiver room. And so if you watched the game last week against Detroit, really for the first time in 4 or 5 years,
Played well.
Our offense looks like the Chiefs' offense of 2019, 2020, 2021.
And you've got some players coming back that are going to help that.
We sure do. Rashee Rice has been suspended the last 6 weeks, but he'll be back this week. And he's one of Patrick's favorite targets, if not his favorite. No slight to Travis Kelce.
Or Taylor Swift, for that matter.
else. Yeah.
But it's going to be fun to watch, and giving Patrick more time, so that he can find that open receiver has really opened the offense back up, and it's going to be exciting.
So as of week 5, there were no undefeated teams. Talk about parity. You're sitting at 3-3. The optimism you said. Are you going to be holding a piece of silver come February?
Look, that's the goal every year, and I'm really excited about this team. Going into the season, I thought this is a much better team than we had last year. Now, we have a bunch of young players, so those young players are going to have to grow, but I've seen this story before. I saw it in 2019. We had a bunch of young players, and they got better throughout the season, and we ended up back in the Super Bowl for the first time in 50 years at the end of that season. So I'm not going to even knock on wood because I have confidence in our guys, and we're going to get back.
And get Buffalo at Arrowhead.
Yeah.
When we started, we talked about the success he's had professional. Since he has been at the helm of the Kansas City Chiefs, 12 playoffs, 11 division championships, 5 conference champions, and 3 Super Bowls. Not a bad record.
Not bad.
But as I think you've seen over the time we had a chance to visit, where I start is exactly why. You've got a class guy who's made a difference, not only professionally, but in his family, but also for the Lord. Clark, thanks for being with us.
Clark, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, sure appreciate it. Great being on with you guys today.